Hello, everybody. Before I start, I would like to apologize in advance for three things. The first one, I'm standing between you and drinks, so I'm sorry about that. I know it can be quite dangerous here in London. The second thing, I've got a bit of a cold, so if I sneeze in the middle of my talk, I'm really sorry about that. I'll try not to. And thirdly, I'm French as well, so I think sometimes we have to apologize for that. But hopefully, everything should go well. So I'm the practice leader for consumer technology and also media and entertainment at Ovum. And I'm going to talk to you about the digital economy in 2030. I don't know how many of you already have been looking at such a long-term vision of the future, but I think it's very relevant today because of the new technologies that are coming to market this year and next year, which are on a kind of a 10-year or decade cycle. So thinking of 5G, for example, is a good example of that. There's so many things to talk about, when you want to talk about the long-term vision of what's going to happen with consumers. But I'm going to focus primarily on entertainment, communications, and commerce and lifestyle. So I'm not going to look at enterprise or the future of the workspace or anything like that. So before, I think it's always really good when you look into the future to look at the past and see, sometimes, we're thinking about those big sci-fi ideas of like, yes, the future is going to be amazing, everything's going to be virtual, etc. But when you look back at what happened 10 years ago or 12 years ago in this instance, you can see that it's not necessarily that much different. But in this case, I think if we look back at 2006, so 12 years ago, those are some of the most popular products of that year. So 2006 was a peak year for digital camera sales. It was a peak year for DVD sales in the US. And also YouTube was about 1.5 years old and was just being acquired by Google in that year. Facebook had only about 13 million users. So there were a lot of those big platforms that weren't really necessarily there yet, but just appeared then. Actually, I started to be an analyst on that year, 2006. I studied for a very long time. It's not that I'm young. I actually studied for very, very long. So the Mobile Connect data card from Vodafone was very interesting at the time because that's where mobile broadband really started to take off to connect your laptop on the move to the 3G network. For content-wise as well, big year for content. That's when Sky launched Sky Sports HD, and the first HD live broadcast of the World Cup, Football World Cup as well in 2006. So very important year, 12 years ago. Quite a lot of things happened since then. But one thing, there you go. To remember is that while a lot of technologies and a lot of new platforms came up and a lot of new ways to consume content, etc., habits die hard. People haven't really changed fundamentally in terms of using the time how they use their time and how they spend their money. This is some data here from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the US specifically. And you can see on the left the time used by activity, so the awake time, because sleeping obviously takes a long time as well, and consumer expenditure. And it's quite interesting to see that actually it hasn't changed that much. So we spend, actually I was very surprised at those results that more than a third of our time is being spent on leisure and sports. Almost more than working or work-related activities. It certainly doesn't feel like that to me, actually. I feel like I work a lot more than I spend leisure and sports. But you have to consider that it's not just about the active population, it's about children are included in there, the elderly are included in there as well. So you could think about it over your lifetime, how much time you spend on those things. In terms of spending, housing is still a very big amount of spend. So just to have shelter, to be able to have a house. Transportation, so this is the US, right? Transportation in the US is very big. So that's a very big spending. And then food and drink and insurance and pension, etc., overspending. But then we look at the changes for each of those categories. So you can see little changes there. I think those little changes really can have a big impact or can be the result of something that's been quite big. And here, I don't want to go into too much details because it's quite difficult to correlate time and money. It's not as easy as you might think. But two things. One thing that's quite happy, and I think it's good value, is people spend more time on, like we said, leisure and entertainment, sports, and they spend more on entertainment. So that's overall, that's quite positive. And that's great, that makes us happier. On the other end of the scale, people spend less time purchasing goods and services and less money on apparel and services. And that's, I think, a result of fast fashion and consumerism. It's just so much easier to buy products today than it was before. And a lot of those products are much, much cheaper as well. So it could be positive, but I think it creates some problems ethically as well. So the mega trends that I want to talk about today. So like I said, I'll be looking only at entertainment, communication, commerce, and lifestyle. And I think there's 4 really key mega trends that are going to happen in the next 12 years. The first one, I call it virtual immersion. So this is an interesting one because I don't think anybody knows exactly what it's going to be like. What you see, what I'm talking about virtual immersion is VR and AR and what impact it will have on those 4 key pillars. What you experience as VR and AR today is not really what VR and AR is going to be in 10 years' time. VR and AR, the impact of VR and AR is going to be more like, think of it as dreaming. When you're dreaming, you can't make the difference between the reality and your dream. So when VR or AR reach to that level, then we're going to see really some key transformation in terms of how people entertain themselves, how they communicate, how they buy stuff, and how they deal with their lifestyle. Then the second one is everywhere commerce. It's just the ability to buy at any time, anything, but more importantly, the ability to sell very easily any of your stuff. It's quite important. Then the third one, intelligence of things. So we talked already a lot about that today. So we talked about digital assistants, so the ability to have those digital assistants on any device that you have, anywhere that you are. Intelligent homes, intelligent clothes, all of those are going to be more predominant in the future. And then the final point is data consumerization that was mentioned in the morning through the session, through Telefonica, on ARA, etc. The use of consumer data is going to be very important. But I think here I'm not talking necessarily about the use of consumer data, but it's more consumer being aware of that use and consumer understanding the benefit of giving the data to a service provider for better services. Not necessarily for advertising, but for just a more tailored, customized services. So we'll start first with virtual immersion. Like I said, I think what VR is going to become and AR, what they're going to become in the future is going to be very interesting. What it is today is not really that transformational. And the really important time to remember about virtual immersion is 2023. This is when we believe the technology limitations of today for VR and AR are going to be addressed, and then the experience is going to be closer to some sort of real experience. And then at that point as well, what we'll see is haptics. So the ability to sense what you're seeing or what you're hearing. So imagine the ability to watch a movie, and when there's an explosion, you can feel the heat of the explosion. So imagine how much that could have an impact on gaming, for example. So I think that the combination of those two really is going to transform the market for entertainment specifically. Mobile is a very important part of this in that transition, and as well in the future because of the application of mobile AR specifically. So you can see the forecast. We expect close to 90 billion annual revenues in 2030. I think that's more than twice the App Store revenues or something like that. So it's like very big. And that doesn't even include devices. This is just content. So everywhere commerce. I think commerce, I'm not an expert on commerce as an analyst. My expertise is more on devices and media. But this is very exciting because I think commerce is the only sector that has that can really use all the technology innovation that we will see in the next 10 years. So we start from the top, all those logos there. The one at the top represents just people being connected. and be able to sell to each other or to recommend products to each other. Then things being connected, the ability to know how long, what's the cycle, the life cycle of that product, where has it been, where does my food comes from, and things like that. Then location, so localization is very important. So Facebook Marketplace has 800 million users now. That's unbelievable, 2 years after launch, out of 2.2 billion users, so 40%, around 40% addressable adoption rate on Facebook's install base. Delivery as well is going to change. You're going to get products delivered to you before you even know it. So already Amazon launched Amazon Key in the US, where the delivery man can come into your house using a smart lock and put the package where it needs to be. It could be delivered to your car as well, apparently, to your car boot now. Then blockchain is going to be very, very important as well for transparency of commerce and the ability for it to be more secure. And then payments. There's so many changes in payments as well. So mobile payments, Apple Pay, Venmo in the US being used a lot by people. Alipay, so hundreds of millions of users for Alipay in China. And then finally, vision AI, we'll say like a kind of computer vision. So the ability to do visual picture search or visual search. So for example, let's say, I like that bottle over here. I'll take a picture of it, and then I can buy it instantly. Right? So it gets delivered to my house or to the boot of my car. So those are really fundamental new technologies that are coming to market that are going to transform the way we do commerce. And I think the most important part is this one. I mean, that's the one I'm the most excited about, that everybody can sell. I've moved country twice in 3 years. Every time we have to rebuy, we spent a lot of time at IKEA buying new furniture, new stuff for the house. In the US, there's IKEA in the US, and then back here in the UK. And we spend a lot of time using Facebook Marketplace actually to recycle, to resell all the stuff that we got. So I think this recycling aspect is very interesting. Next, the intelligence of things. So I talked already a bit about vision AI. I think this is very important. We talked about voice quite a lot today, and digital assistants, etc., the use of Alexa, Google Assistant, and Cortana in the house or on your smartphone. But really the next step is vision AI. I think the use cases of it and that problem that we have today about how practical digital assistants are might be solved by vision AI, because the applications are have a lot more impact, more than just a new user interface. So I've selected a few of them here, and I've placed them on this chart, which is just when they're going to be kind of deployed, commercially deployed, and what impact they're going to have on the market. And you can see here that lip-syncing technology is pretty good, actually. If you think like Mariana was talking about the fact that earlier on the smart speaker doesn't understand an accent, for example, but you can use, if you have a video camera in the room that can monitor her face while she speaks, the accuracy then of the command would be much better, of the response would be much better, because you merge vision with voice. So you hear the sound and you have also the mouth moving, so you can guess a bit better what people are talking about. There are a few examples here. Those come from last week from the iPhone event. 2 examples there. Oh, actually, this one comes from the iPhone event. So that's an app called Home Court, where you just put your phone, and let's say I would be playing basketball, and the iPhone, basically, the app just tracks my basketball skills, which would be very bad, but in this instance, it was very good. So the number of attempts and the number of times you go through the hoop, etc. So this is very interesting, because before, to do that, for training for an athlete, for example, you need to wear clothes with sensors everywhere. You need to run in a lab, like a rat, basically. So that's very different. I think that's very important. And then the other one that's very important is this one. So that's from LAN Labs. And what they've done, they give you the capability to just scan the real world. So you do a 3D scan, so I can take that object, do a 3D picture or 3D scan of it. Then it's in my phone. I can send it to anybody, I can put it in another place, I can sell it online or something like that. So this is really, I think, very, very interesting. And that's also links to Vision AI. But what's the long-term game? I think the long-term game is about creating reactive environments. The long-term game is to use Vision AI in autonomous cars, for example. The long-term game is to do emotion capture. So using Vision AI to really recognize people's face and trying to understand in what state of mood they are. And offer different services based on that state of mood. It's quite important. So the next one is data consumerization. So I mentioned that at the beginning. Here we talked about the quantified self, so the ability to get data about yourself to improve your health or your fitness, for example. So that's really pretty much being driven today by the wearables market. And wearables sales, haven't been necessarily as high as we expected. So the market is a bit kind of flattening at the moment. But that doesn't mean it's not going to become important in the future, especially in a world where the population is getting older. So in the UK alone, by 2030, there'll be more than 20 million people over the age of 60. And it's not just about like how many people are going to be above 60, but it's about like when you think about it, if I'm going to live 100 years old, I better start now to be healthy because I don't want to live for 40 years in pain or, it's just like, so it's going to catch on much earlier than 60 years old to use the services to try live longer, but live longer in a better state. The second example here, I think, which is quite interesting, is to use biometric response to create entertainment tailored to you. So you watch a romantic comedy, for example, and you cry, but your friend doesn't cry. I mean, you have your own way of reacting to movies, right? Or you get scared of, or some horror movies really gets you scared, but scared like to the point where you have nightmares, so you don't want that. But some other horror movies, don't get you scared at all. It's quite boring. It's just blood everywhere. There's no point of watching that. So you do something in the middle, and this kind of system will be able to know what you like, really what you like, because of how you respond to it. And that could be really interesting. There'd be no more movies with a bad ending that you wouldn't like anymore. You just watch the movies, It's like, I think I'm going too far now. This is like too long term, maybe. But this is very exciting, right? So we talked about those 4 mega trends, but I think another trend that applies to all of that is how we're going to pay for things, how we're going to buy those experiences. I think there are 3 different trends in terms of business models here. I mentioned that already before, but like premium immersion, that immersion that's like a dream, where you actually feel what's happening and you see it and you experience it really like if you were there. I think that's going to bring a new layer of monetization to entertainment. To the same level, to some extent, as when we moved from black and white to color. So people bought movies that were made in black and white that were transformed into color, so just to experience that movie in a different way. So you can imagine the same thing with this, where people would buy old movies of 2018 at the time, and experiences so they can feel the heat of explosions, or they can feel the wind, or they can feel all sorts of different things. So that could be really, really exciting, a new revenue opportunity there. The second one is object as a service. So it's already happening now, especially in transportation. So with Zipcar and Uber, etc. So if you ask now a younger generation X or millennials about this, most of them don't understand the concept of owning a car, and that a car should be a collective thing that everybody uses to go from one place to the other. So that transforms the way we think about buying products and services. So it's moving more towards a subscription-based model or a hybrid model where you pay a subscription to have the privilege to use that service, and then you pay on a per-use basis. And then finally, I think we talked a little bit about digital assistants, but that was mentioned quite a lot during the afternoon. So there will be at some point in the future, within that 10-year time frame, where we'll have the ultimate digital assistant that will be controlling the digital life of your household. So that, we call it a digital butler. And that's definitely going to be a subscription model, I think. And that's really important because we need to think about that today, because it's how we monetize AI is a very difficult thing. I think nobody has a solution. Consumer-facing AI today is not being monetized at all. It's maybe being used by Amazon or Google to acquire more customers to their services, but it's not necessarily being monetized directly. So I think this is a key point here. So I thought, it's all this exciting stuff. What about the things we won't see in 2030, or that would start to disappear? I think that'd be quite, because we started with 2006, the things that have disappeared, and what about the things that are going to disappear? So there's a few examples there, although some of them I'm not entirely convinced yet. And I think there's a big debate in the smart home market. If you track the smart home market, everybody's talking about the switches. Are they going to still be there? Are they going to disappear? There's certainly going to be a time where your great-great-grandchildren will be laughing at you, or you won't be there, or laughing about the idea of you going across the room to turn on a light. You know, this is not really the most efficient way of getting that service of getting a light. Traffic light systems, well, because of autonomous cars, you know, you don't really need that signal of color to stop. The car would stop automatically to let the pedestrian come across. You'll definitely have that little part of it, because we're not autonomous humans, right? So we still need information to know when we can cross the road. The other one, so actually there were some announcements from Amazon about Amazon Go, which is their retail experience without any sort of cashier or till. And they said they will launch about 3,000 stores by 2021. And that's really transforming. It's mainly, at the moment, they have free stores. So there's quite a lot of stores to build. But it's really transformational, because this is really impacting the retail industry. And this is a huge industry, the physical retail industry. So something to look out for. Obviously, the key and the wallet, I'm sure I would have done a presentation like this 10 years ago. I would have said the same thing about the key and the wallet, but I really think this time it's for real. Earth is really going to disappear. So how do we get there? So what does that mean for everybody in the room here? Whether you're a telco, whether you're a media company, whether you're a technology vendor, you know, how do you prepare for all of that? How do you get there? What shall we do to make that future realize itself? So there are five things I picked up here. So virtual immersion, so we need to create an ecosystem of 3D volumetric content. So there are some studios already that Intel has created in LA that helps you to capture movies, to do movies in 3D volumetric format. There are some new formats. I think USDZ from Apple is one of the formats for 3D content. So there's an ecosystem being created, but I think it's important because, as we've always seen in the past, for any new technology that came through, if there is no content for that platform or for that new technology, it just won't work. So content needs to be created for it. So vision AI capabilities, all those use cases I put on that chart earlier on, you know, we need to really have a way for developers to develop around those use cases, different type of experiences, etc. So we need platforms with APIs, etc., to be able to do that. It needs to be also the cost of doing it needs to be quite cheap. But now, because that technology is coming on all new smartphones next year will have 5 cameras. So the next Samsung will have 5 cameras. The next Huawei will have 5 cameras. So vision AI is really coming like to the mass market next year, or to the kind of premium smartphone market. Then I think number 3 is really to empower consumers with those e-commerce tools, and especially to sell and recycle what they have, I think. This is a whole new opportunity. You see how much, I mean, sorry, I'm talking about my life again, but I went to the tip quite a lot recently. And the amount of stuff in there that could be reused or resold or repaired in some sort of way is incredible. It would be so much better for the environment. Then the number 4, facilitate data consumerization in a secure and safe environment. Yes, that's very important. I think there's a big role to play for brands that people trust already today, and those are telcos in particular. People do trust telcos, they trust banks to some level. So to provide that secure and safe environment is very important. Then future-proof your pricing structure against the new business models I talked about early on. Well, that's quite hard, that's quite difficult to do, but I think any company that just is in the business of selling hardware is in trouble. I think they've been in trouble already for the past 5 years. But what people buy is the experience and the services, not necessarily the object anymore, except maybe for something like an iPhone. So it's important to move away from that one-time purchase, that one-time relationship with consumers, to more of an ongoing, continuous relationship with consumers, and to prepare and to create business models around that. I think with this, that's the end of the presentation. So thank you very much for your time. And I think we've got a few minutes for questions, if you have any. Okay.
Ronan, it could be the audience is trying to decide if they are excited or appalled by the future that you have just laid out. I'm not so sure myself. Okay, but he's around if you do have any questions for him. Let me briefly say thank you very much for the presentation.